podcast. I'm also streaming in a couple of my groups here for my lovely clients. I am joined today by a fantastic guest, Leslie. Leslie is a developmental psychologist, has a PhD, and I was very, very excited to get her on today because some of the stuff that she talks about and the content that she shares is right up my street, and I know it's going to be up your guys' street as well. And that is stuff such as self-compassion. She has loads of tips on how to deal with that, and we're going to talk about negativity and mindset, and we're going to also talk about the benefits of fitness and nutrition tied in with that as well, because it's all tied in, for our mental and physical health. So, Leslie, how are you on this fine sunny day?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you and your listeners. I really appreciate the opportunity.
No problem at all. So, Leslie, how did you get into this? Obviously, you've got a lot of great credentials. What made you go down that path? Was there a personal thing for you that sort of led that, or was it just a desire, or did it just come knocking on your door one day?
That's a great question. Thanks so much. Well, really, before I became a coach, like many people, I was working long hours in a very demanding job. And unfortunately, I was also mismanaging my stress. I was eating lots of junk food. I wasn't exercising. I wasn't sleeping well. I was snapping at my husband because I was tense all the time. And I certainly wasn't having any fun. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was suffering from burnout, and I was unintentionally trading my well-being, my health, and my personal relationships for success in my career. I wasn't making self-care a priority, and I'd yet to achieve that sustainable work-life balance. And I started to, again, suffer some of these untoward consequences. So I started to look around for something to help myself. And fortunately, I enrolled in a wellness class offered through the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine, where I learned about an integrative approach to health. And that briefly recognizes the interdependence of 7 core areas of health, which include sleep, nutrition, movement, relationships, resilience, spirituality, which is really about purpose, and environment. So as you can imagine, during the class, I was essentially encouraged to clean up my act in all these 7 core areas of health, which I did. And after several months of concerted effort, I began to feel better. I lost some weight. I felt more relaxed. I felt more connected to my husband, and I felt more purposeful and productive again. I was so happy with the lifestyle changes that I made, and so I decided to take my efforts to the next level, and I became a national board certified health and wellness coach. So now I help other high achievers to improve the quality of their lives too.
Sorry, there was a bit of a delay there. Apologies, Leslie. I was just making sure all my groups are all streamed on there. Okay, awesome. So, I had a little nosy through, and I saw some of the testimonials from the people that you've worked with. What made you, because obviously you don't just do this for you; you actually help people, you help big businesses and stuff like that. Did you feel like this was something that needed to be done? Do you feel like that was your calling? Because I'm a business owner as well, and I've had many moments where these negative thoughts have had a massive impact, and I kind of touched on it a little bit before we went live about I've had cognitive behaviour therapy, and I believe that changed my life immensely, just by working out little things on why I behave the way I do, and I use fitness because of that as well, because I have so many people walk through my gym. And do you know the best thing for me, Leslie, is not them getting results or lifting heavier weights. It's when they walk into a session and I can see they're down, I can see they're negative or upset, and they're quiet, say hello, and then by the end, just 45 minutes of exercise and me having a joke around, they walk out and yeah, they're hot, sweaty, but they've got a smile on their face, and a lot of them, it's one of the best feelings for me. They'll walk out and they'll go, "Thanks, I really needed that," and I get a big buzz off that. That's not why I got into this originally. I just wanted to work in fitness, but that for me, if I go home happy, it's usually because I've helped make up for people's day that much better. So I imagine was that something for you, like this? People are very negative. I need to come in and I need to teach these people how to overcome that.
Well, I don't know that I definitely felt a calling. I really wanted to be able to help people. As a developmental psychologist, I really wanted to have a place where I could apply my understanding of transformation and my understanding of the life course and my understanding of the typical challenges that people face as they go through their lives. I definitely had this whole thing about, what? How come nobody told me about this thing called stress management? So for me, I definitely had a big eye-opening experience when I got in and I learned about all these 7 core areas of health, and I learned about the research on all, best practices in these 7 core areas of health. And I was really like, wow, okay, I went through a PhD program and I've never heard of any of this. So it's definitely like another content area that I was like, and wow, this is really critical information. And I would really like to help get the word out, because I really did see the value, especially around stress management.
And I don't think people really, I know the saying, this particular over here is very big, stress kills, stress is a killer. And I think people, they underestimate that a little bit, because stress is not just a simple case of, I've got a lot going on or I'm not happy. Stress is a state that your body really shouldn't be in, and obviously, you'll know about the endocrine system. One of my most fascinating parts of the human body, the endocrine system, or some call it the mothership, because people don't realize how much of an impact hormones can play on the rest of your body, and that includes the nervous system and the brain. And I've been, talking about meditation and stuff for a long time to help reduce that stress. In your opinion, because I guess there's no right way. Some people like to meditate. Some people might go and do yoga. As I mentioned before, some people might go to the gym, or some people might just prefer to be at home. What in your opinion is a real benefit, a real method to de-stress and try and sort of switch everything round? What if someone's gone so far into that stress negative area that it's almost feels like people can't get back? Like, do they start little? Is there something they can do to start little, or do you think it needs a whole sit down and complete reprogram?
I love that question. So as a coach, we know that we really want to make small tweaks. We don't really want people to feel that they need an entire overhaul, because then again, this is overwhelming. So often we try to work with people to help them make those small changes and those substitutions that will help them turn things around. There are definitely things I think it requires when we talk about the 7 core areas of health, essentially, we are really looking for a multimodal, if you will, intervention. You're not going to there's no silver bullet, there's no easy cure, right? But there are both short-term things that you can do and long-term things that you can do. The good news is that you can intervene in many ways. The thing that I like to think is that you make your kind of menu, your repertoire of activities that you can engage in to begin to turn it around. Of course, the first thing you have to do is you have to become aware of your stress levels. A lot of people, the way the water, if you will, that they're swimming in is so habitual that they can no longer sense the difference, right, between when they're calm and when they're stressed, right? So one of the first thing I teach clients is how to monitor their stress levels. How do you know when you're feeling stressed? So for example, people might feel signs of being stressed or things like feeling exhausted a lot of the time, right? Having low motivation, feeling pressured and overwhelmed. That sense that they have to take care of everyone and everything but themselves, right? Feelings of irritability. You might find yourself snapping at loved ones. There might be a sense of isolation. You feel like you're all alone and that no one understands what you're going through. You might frantically try and get everything done, like scurrying around, being busy, right?
That's me.
But ultimately, fear, right, that you're headed for burnout or worse, right? You might feel like your performance is slipping. You might be sleeping fitfully because you can't turn your mind off. It's constantly pestering. You might find yourself stress eating, like junk food, sugar, these kinds of things, high carb foods. You might find that you're retreating, right? That you're not spending time with friends and family. And you might find you might be experiencing physical sensations in your body, like headaches or a stiff neck or pain in your stomach. You might have some diarrhea, some nausea, things like that. So it's important, first of all, to really monitor, right? Like we can operate, as you mentioned, stress is not inherently bad. We have, like, you could argue that you have like 3 zones that you can operate in. You can operate in the green zone, you can operate in the yellow zone, you can operate in the orange zone, and you can operate in the red zone. And really, as you mentioned, when we stay chronically in that orange or red zone, with those high cortisol levels, the high adrenaline, these things do underpin most all of the chronic diseases that people basically die from prematurely. So we didn't know that, right? Medicine has discovered that. And so this is why there's a big push to try and help people manage stress. So I do just want to say that we want to monitor what zone am I operating in. And basically, we want to stay in the green zone as much as humanly possible. And a lot of the way to stay in the green zone for a lot of people is a head game. It's a head game because it's how we are thinking about what we're doing that really drives whether or not it goes up to the yellow, the orange, and the red zone. And really, those habits of mind, if you will, that mind management is really what can help us to lower those stress levels when it starts to spike. Scholars have discovered that what we really want is that heart rate variability, which is where you're going along, you get a spike, but very quickly you bring it back down. And you go along, you get a spike, but then very quickly you bring it down. This is okay. Human beings are designed basically to cope with those kinds of stress responses. The problem is when it gets high and then it remains there chronically. This is really where you want to definitely take lots of action in an effort to try and break that pattern, if you will.
How do you know, Leslie, you mentioned in the coloured zones, obviously, when we're talking about stress, like, do you just create your own? Is there an overall chart there, or is it obviously relative to the person? Like, do you decide what is your green zone and yellow zone and all the way to the red zone? Because I imagine, obviously, it's not going to be the same for everyone, and everyone has different, things going on in life, different kind of jobs and stuff. So how do you define what falls into that zone, or what zone will or what will take you into that next zone?
Yes, that's exactly what I work with a lot of clients to basically gain the self-knowledge to understand for them, right? There are standardized tests that have been made that you can use to get a sense, answer some questions, and get a sense of where your stress level is at. Of course, there's been lots of research correlated with the outcomes of various stress levels or levels of stress, right? So there are definitely some standardized things. And I do have a stress level test on my website that people can use to sort of get a test, if you will, or get a measure, a quantitative measure of where they're at. But you're absolutely right. There are lots of individual differences. Not all nervous systems are created equal. Not all lifestyles are created equal. Some people are taking on more demands than others, right? So we're really looking to try and strike that healthy balance. But primarily, I work with clients to get a sense of what for them constitutes the green zone, the yellow zone, orange zone, and the red zone. And then along those lines, we also create, like I mentioned, a menu of things that they can do to try and reset that nervous system. And the good news is there are so many ways you can do it, right? You can intervene at the level of the body, which I think is really what you're talking about when you exercise. This is a great way to flip that switch, right? And help you move out of that a stress response and back into the calm response, right? There are other ways you can do it by having conversations with people that you love, cherish, and trust. This is another great way. We could call this like a social reset. You can also do this with a beloved pet, a cat, a dog.
I was just about to ask you that. I was about to say, I tell you what brings me into the green zone, getting home and seeing my gorgeous boy and him getting all excited, his little bum shake, running up to me to give me kisses. The amount of dopamine and serotonin that is released from that's me. I'm happiest when I'm with my dog. So I was just going to ask you that, but you beat me to it.
So exactly, you can do it with a social reset, right? So you can say like a physical reset, a social reset. You can do it with a cognitive reset, which is where you think about the problem or you think about the challenge differently, and you check for thoughts that create issues, like examples of like should thoughts or perfectionistic thoughts or catastrophizing thoughts or even I think people-pleasing thoughts, right? These kinds of things. There are certain kinds of thoughts that can really wreak havoc. So you can do a cognitive intervention. And then you can also do an emotional intervention, right? Where you just sort of try and like you do a gratitude practice, for instance, you count your blessings, that kind of thing. You think about things that you're proud of. You think about things that inspire you. You think about the things that you love, that you're interested in, that you're fascinated by, right? It's kind of like these are a few of my favorite things approach, right? To shift emotionally. And then of course you can do a spiritual reset as well by contemplating the things that are most important for you, your big dreams, your big desires, the things that you've dedicated your life to. Your big why, if you will. These are like 5 different ways, again, that you can affect a stress response reset, if you will. You can even eat food like a nutritious snack. This would be another physical reset where you actually, and this is why people eat junk food, because they are high carb foods. They are trying to reset the body through that, as you mentioned, the release of those hormones that can make that shift. Chocolate, for instance, right, can do that. So the point is, there are many ways that you can intervene to make the change. And sometimes what works today won't work tomorrow. So it's good to have a variety of things that you can turn to.
And would you recommend, so when you say like, obviously what would work today wouldn't work tomorrow. I'm a big fan of journaling. For me, that is my meditation because I'm quite self-aware and I just accept the fact that I struggle to switch off, to meditate, and I won't force myself to do something I just know that I can't do. And as I told you the other day, I'm having a couple of cognitive problems at the moment, as it is neurologically, but I have to meditate to deliberately keep them stress levels down because that sets everything off. However, when we're talking about the zone and stuff, do you think it's important to, or do you shy away from writing down what your stress triggers might be, so that you know Okay, that didn't work this time, I need to change. So are you a fan of, basically what I'm saying is, are you a fan of writing all these emotions down, these triggers, what makes you feel good, what makes you feel not, or do you think that actually putting that down on paper is more likely to set you off?
Oh, okay, great. The research, again, I'd have to turn to the research. The research says that journaling can be a very useful tool because getting something out of your head and onto paper, again, if we think about it in like a big general terms, right, a high level abstraction, then we're really talking about moving something from subjectivity to objectivity. So when we're feeling things and we don't really know what they are, we're kind of subject to them. So journaling is a great way to make those things objectified. They're out there on the paper in black and white. Now I can look at them and I can begin to interact with them in a more objective way. So I think that journaling has been demonstrated to be a very powerful tool to help people become aware of what they're grappling with.
Sorry, we had another disconnect there. So, brilliant, thank you for that, because I'm a big fan of journaling, and I always liked what you mentioned there about not subjecting to it, like not being, or I guess another term is not being a prisoner to it. By allowing it to go on paper, you're almost setting yourself free in a kind of way, and that's why I like to do it. Because so you mentioned about counting your blessings and stuff. I started doing this journaling, and I've done it many times, but as many people, Leslie, and I don't stick to things. However, I've been doing this now solid for about 6 straight months, and all I do, keep it again, I make things easy for myself. It was something that I did with a life coach years ago, and it was just every day I write 3 things at the start of the day. And it's a bit. He's a big teacher on plan your feelings. A guy named Paul Moore, which sounds taboo to most people, but his ideology is if you leave your feelings to chance, then you open yourself up to allow anything to come in, right? And what I tend to find is you can get a control of that straight away as soon as you wake up by writing down. Today, and it's just choosing one. Today, I plan to feel. And his one rule is don't say happy, because that doesn't mean anything. Happiness is relative, right? So it might be a word. Now, the first word I put was I want to be grateful. Okay, and it's like the second line is why. Okay, because it makes me feel good to be grateful. Is it positive feelings? And then the third line you put is what are you going to do that day to help achieve that feeling? I did it on day 2. And you're supposed to choose a word of the day. Day 2, gratitude. Day 3, gratitude. 4, 5. And there has been a couple of days where I've chose calm, and depending on the day. But I've realised that gratitude was the word I wanted to choose every day because of how it made me feel, and other people feel the benefits to that as well. So that's why I was sort of touching on the journaling and getting those feelings down, because I believe that has been my way of sort of not disconnecting from everything, because I tend to find it, and I'll have a lot of people that might come into my gym, or a lot of clients online that will reach out to me and be like, I'm just not feeling motivated, I'm not in a good place, and I will ask them why. You need to note this down, otherwise how are you meant to overcome it? And I think that's one thing that I help people do. It's not just about getting in, do some exercise. Let's tap into that. What's going on? How can we break it down and reverse engineer it and stuff like that? So I wanted to talk about self-compassion with you, Leslie, because I know that's something that you talk about a lot, that you're very into, and more specifically, rebounding from sort of setbacks, because obviously you talked a little bit about before, if people fail at something, or something stressful, something doesn't work, it's very easy for them to just, that doesn't work. And I, like you believe, is that self-compassion is a big reason why people give up, because they don't think they can do it. They're not kind enough to themselves. And my wife has got a big book on self-compassion from her time with therapy and stuff, and she's big on it. Self-compassion is key. So teach me a little bit about your work on self-compassion.
Well, great. So, and I would just add, when you're asking the question, the why question, you could ask also, what are you telling yourself? What are you telling yourself? Because a lot of times what's going on there is people are trapped in a story, and what they really are, I like what you said, they're trapped kind of in the entity versus the growth mindset. Right? So in the entity mindset, they think that things should be easy and that they shouldn't have to struggle with anything. And if it's not easy, therefore, if they're having a difficult time with it, then they're not good at it. Therefore, they should quit. Versus a growth mindset that says, yep, I'm in it and I'm on my way to mastery, and it is a struggle to get there sometimes to varying degrees depending on what I'm doing, but I know why this is worth it, and I'm going to stay in the struggle until I become masterful. One of the things about mastery that we really know, it's like 11,000 hours. Like a lot of times you can tell your clients, right? How many hours have you put into doing this, right? And if they say 6 hours, it's like, okay, you're 6 hours into your 11,000 hours, right? So scholars know how long it takes to become masterful. So many people probably won't want to become that masterful. You don't need to become that masterful in many of the things we do. But if we do have a better expectation of how long, so this would be a thinking thing, this would be a cognitive intervention. What's your expectation? How quickly do you think this should happen? And if people have an erroneous expectation about how long they're going to struggle, another wonderful book on change says that it's probably going to be a 6-month concerted effort. A lot of people think they can do this overnight, or they think they can do it in a month, but a lot of times we discover that it takes, depending on what it is, at least 6 months to create a new habit, right? And a lot of the things that we're doing, you mentioned with your meditation, these are habits of mind, and they are invisible and they can be hard to see. Certainly self-compassion is a habit of mind, but as you mentioned, growth mindset is also a habit of mind. And definitely deciding what emotion I want to feel, that is a habit of mind, so that we don't fall prey to our default, which is the negativity bias, right? The negativity bias. It's easy to feel negative things. We have to come in. It's kind of like our software, right? We have to keep upgrading. The negativity bias is the default software, but we can upgrade, right, to like 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, in which we are
I really want to touch on that
counteracting,
the negativity bias.
That default.
Why is it that humans
setting.
do that?
And it's not that.
Is it an evolutionary thing, like dating back? Is it because it's a protection, like your body's protecting you from being negative, even though it makes us not feel good? Why is it? Why do we naturally go? There was that song Baz Luhrmann. I had it on in my gym the other day, actually, from my clients, because we brought it up about wear sunscreen, obviously the song. And one of the lines I'll never forget is, remember the compliments you've had, not the insults. If you succeed on doing this, telling me how. Basically confirming that's because it's extremely hard to do. Why do we could get 5 compliments in one day, but 1 insult, and that's what we hang on to. What is that? Why do humans do that?
Well, the first thing, like just in general, it's sort of been posited that our brain is essentially a problem-solving machine. It's designed to solve problems. So our brain looks for and fixates on problems. Now, the problem is when we fixate on a problem, we tend to zoom in on that problem. And when we do that, that problem fills the frame. And we forget, basically, this is why keeping things that saying keep it in perspective is so powerful, because essentially we lose sight of the big picture when we zoom in. So when we zoom out, we see, oh, the big picture, and this problem is as a fraction of the big picture. So I understand, okay, I'm struggling in 10% of my life, not 100% of my life. But when we blow it up to solve the problem, right, because that's what our brain wants to do, it feels like 100% of our life is this problem. So I would say two things. Number one, we're solving problems. That's what we're designed to do. So that insult is a problem because we need to protect our reputation. And if that person doesn't see us in the way that we want to be seen, that is a problem. That is a big problem that needs and requires our attention. The other people who are complimenting us, we understand, okay, all is well there, all is well there, all is well there. There's no problem there. I don't need to attend to that. But with this guy who's insulting me, that's a problem, and I need to address it because I can't afford to have my reputation, as it were, called into question. So this is why we can get stuck in a kind of rumination where we think over and over and over and over and over about the problem, because there aren't sometimes solutions to the problem aren't always readily apparent. So our brain can get stuck in a kind of loop thinking about it. Right? And when we get stuck, that's the other thing to know about how our brain works. When we have one bad thing that's not working, it's kind of like a Google search. Our brain says, well, what else isn't working? Oh yeah, don't forget this isn't working. Don't forget this isn't working. Don't forget this isn't working. And what about this and this and this and this and this? And then suddenly that one problem can mushroom into many more problems. So this is it's kind of just the way our brain functions. So when we see that happening, when we see that Google search happening where we're like getting the litany of things that aren't working, just like we do when a keyword search on Google, we get a big long list of what it is we're looking for, right? So that's where you need to change the keyword search. So I encourage people, you can have three positions on this. Number one, you can have only pay attention to the positive. Number two, you can have only pay attention to the negative. And number three is you can pay attention to the whole picture. You can say, okay, 3-1, 5-1. I'm doing pretty good. I can't expect to be perfect. You can't please everyone. So, right, you use your rubric, again, your expectations. What constitutes good enough performance such that I don't have a problem anymore, right? Now, of course, who gave you the insult? Was that your boss? Was that a significant other, right? It depends. Was that a stranger who might have been having a bad day, right? So we have to check the source and see whether or not we really do need, if they do have a point, what can I do to improve?
Yeah, a lot better than what I was even hoping for, to be honest, right? Leslie.
Because so does that answer the question, kind of why we get stuck on that negativity?
We don't know why we feel the way we feel. You mentioned before about the why and also the what. People just know that they don't feel good, or they feel angry, or whatever emotion that they're feeling, but they don't tend to know why they feel that way. And I think you've just encapsulated that in a much better way than I ever could. So yes, it did ask my question, and I find it so interesting that we do that, the negativity bias. And there seems to be a few people in the world that are just all positive, and they're positive bias, and I don't know if I always believe it, because I'm thinking, are we hardwired that way? It almost seems, but I guess you can train yourself using the things that you said and the tactics to reprogram yourself that way, to kind of switch over to the other side. And I believe that that's what you kind of help people do, if I'm not mistaken, is switch that around.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say that, scholars, when they talk in terms of personality, right, there are many measures of personality, but the big five the big five is personality, test or theory, rubric, model, does put neuroticism in there. And neuroticism is the tendency to feel negative emotions. So again, not all human beings are created equal. Some of us have more struggle with this neuroticism, if you will, with this dimension than others. So we need to know that about ourselves and know that we kind of, for whatever reason, there are developmental reasons why this can happen. There are biological reasons why this can happen. But the point is, it is important to know if you tend to be someone who's prone to feeling negative emotions. And then, yes, to come in, it's to your advantage to come in for the reasons that we said: health, productivity, relationship reasons, resilience reasons, to come in and help to turn that sort of, again, mind habit around. And that is certainly something that I help people with. There was something else you said that I wanted to comment on. I can't remember what it was. But the biggest thing when you're thinking about things is to really notice, oh, I know what it was. So basically, emotions serve two functions. Number one, they serve to signal, and number two, they serve to sustain. So when you're feeling, just like what you said, when people get a signal emotion that says, I'm angry about something, but I don't know what it is, this is a wonderful opportunity to pause and reflect on your values, because what it means is something you cherish or something you need, some expectation, is not being met. And that means you need to redouble your efforts to, again, work towards fulfilling your desire or upholding that thing that you cherish or living, as it were, your values, right? But most of the time, like you said, we want to be running our efforts on things like hope, like joy, like interest, like inspiration, like there are like 10 positive emotions associated with flourishing, like gratitude, like serenity, a kind of peace and certainty that we are working purposefully towards our goals. So most of the time, scholars say 3 to every 1. You should be feeling 3 positive emotions to every 1 negative emotion. And really only about 20% of the population have mastered
feelings,
that.
And I imagine you may agree with this, or I might be completely wrong. But if I was to picture negative feelings versus positive feelings on like a scale, I would probably say that regret is right. I'm mirrored here, right down at the bottom end of the scale. Why is regret such a, I don't want to say irreversible, but why is that really just take over your body and then why is that the big one? Is that because what you said before, is that to do with self-image or self-compassion? Is that about your values? Is that where you don't even, your own values aren't even aligning with you? And if so, I've noticed personally, this is why I ask, because regret tends to be something that stuck with me a lot, and with issues I've had to deal with. How do you get over that? If that's even a possible thing?
Oh, that's so wonderful that you bring up regret. Yes, I have a whole course on coping effectively with regret. But regret is definitely a combination of those negative emotions, right? We have inside of there anger, sadness, guilt, shame. It is a real big cocktail of all fear that we can't overcome it, right? Big cocktail of negative emotions that can be very challenging to cope with. Usually, one of the biggest things also with regret is it really is about 2 primary things. Number one, you're grieving the loss of something that you cherish. And this is still something so this then moves from regret into grief work. So how is it that we can grieve the loss of the cherished thing? And more importantly, mourning, which is really finding a suitable substitute for the cherished thing that has been lost, right? So that we can get back on track. Again, this kind of goes to the spirituality dimension, which is really just about purpose and meaning in our life, so that we can still feel that we can move towards our big desires. But you're absolutely right. There's a piece in there about integrity that I wasn't able to live up to my standards. I wasn't able to be the kind of person that I wanted to be. And I fear that somehow my reputation has been tarnished, and I don't know if I can redeem myself. So a lot of things, if I can clean it up, if I can, right? So again, ways of trying to think strategically and usefully around those issues of reputation and of issues of grief and of loss, and also of working, clarifying, using the feelings of regret to clarify what's most important to us, and not allowing ourselves to engage in certain counterproductive thinking that is also leaving us stuck.
Forcing you to
right?
assess.
So regret is a challenge.
Values. It's almost like it's lingering there because it's like an alarm. It's trying to tell you you're regretting this right now because you need to assess where your values are, where you stand with everything. If that would be a good way to summarise that a little bit.
Yes, that your integrity is at jeopardy, right? Is at hazard right now, right? So there is a part that's trying to tell you that. A lot of times we regret things that we did in our youth, and a lot of times missed opportunities and things like that. And unfortunately, there is a certain amount of we learn about ourselves through living our lives. And so if through failures or setbacks, that helps you to clarify what you want, who you are, who you want to be. Because life is really sort of, again, back to your growth mindset, it's really a process of becoming. Because when we're young, we're not well formed. I mean, that's the point. It takes a long time to figure out who am I. For some of us, many of us, who am I? Who do I want to be in this world? How can I make a meaningful contribution? How do I fit in? Where's my place, right? How does the world work? A lot of us, it's a process to figure all that out. So yes, sometimes we make missteps. We wish we had gone down different paths. And by recognizing now that you want to go down that path, there's still an opportunity to try and go down that path. There's also an opportunity to become more human and more humane, which is really kind of what self-compassion can do for you as you come to better understand the nature of the human condition, and to sort of be with people around more difficult losses, if you will, right? As human beings, we rarely get everything we want, right? We can fight for it, but it's no guarantee that we're going to get it, right? But we can fight for it. And that's where I think what you spoke about, the resilience piece, where we get knocked down, but we get back up again. And we continue on our efforts to work towards our goals. And we never know whether or not we're going to win or going to achieve until we get there, if you will. So we have to be able to hang in there for as long as it takes, depending on how important the goal is for us. And certainly our health and well-being is a goal worth struggling for, worth striving for.
Because, let's say, we've got a finisher in the gym. We're streaming here in the gym members group too. And one of the finishes called I Get Knocked Down. And it's that song, right? I Get Knocked Down. And we're having to do burpees going up and down, up and down. So even though the words are brilliant, I just imagined some people might have been watching shivering at the very thought of that sentence there. But the actual premise itself, absolutely. Let's say what.
Well, life is a struggle, you could argue.
Well, I mean,
and
I'm
we
good
do
with
have
analogies,
to
right? It
contend
seems to
for
be a
the
gift
things
of
that we
mine. I
want.
create analogies.
They aren't given to us on a
helps
silver
me in my
platter.
job.
We have to work
and I've
hard for them
always
sometimes.
compared life to poker, right? So I like to play poker, okay? And there is some skill game to it, but it reminds me very much of life. And I've created a film content on this because I really do believe they're very similar. It can be a skill game, but it can also be a massive, massive game of luck. And even though it's a big luck game, the skill comes from how you choose to manipulate that luck to everyone else. So you're not playing the cards, you're playing the people playing the cards, and that's how poker works. And once you've understood that psychology of it, that's how people are good at it. Yes, of course, it's luck, it's gambling essentially, but you're not just playing the cards and hoping for the best. You're looking around and you're monitoring what people do to how to get on top. And for example, the pair of aces could be the equivalent to being born, into a wealthy family, right? So you've got everything you need. You've got wealth. Your career is there on a silver platter. You mentioned platters before. Great. And you've got somebody who comes into a hand with 7-2 offsuit, the hammer, the worst possible starting game from an odds perspective. That could be someone who has grown up in poverty, hasn't really got any living off the state, hasn't really got a great education, not going into a good school. That person could go on to be an entrepreneur and create the most incredible. It could be the next Apple, right? But the person who had aces, or the person who had the wealth, they could turn to a life of drugs and completely ruin their life, or worse. So life is kind of like poker in the sense that you don't all end up with the same start. When you play a game, some of you are going to end up with great cards, some of you are going to end up with terrible cards. But ultimately, it's how you look around the room and go, okay, I may have 7-2, but I'm going to play this as if it's a winning hand, and I can still beat that person with aces. On paper, I can't, or I shouldn't, but it can still happen. So I tend to use that analogy. Because I'm just good with analogies, Leslie, to compare. But I use that because you mentioned before about nothing comes on a silver platter. You don't know what's going to happen. So I digress now, Leslie, because I waffled on.
Well, yeah, what I like about both our analogies is there's another game and another hand. And again, for me, like as a scientist, it would be there's another trial, there's another study, there's another, if we do sports analogy, because you're right, what analogy are you living inside of? And in all of these, there are another opportunity. So we're going to show up for the next opportunity, show up for the next opportunity, show up for the next opportunity. And we don't know what's going to happen inside of that next opportunity. So that's, again, a more resilient or growth mindset.
Something I wanted to pick
I
the brains on.
Like we do need to attend to the metaphor inside of
which we talked about the weather before. We've got a freak nice day. But in my online group, we've been going outdoors quite a bit. That's been kind of the theme of this month. And I've been setting these guys something that we call a scavenger hunt, a nature challenge. So I'm trying to encourage them to get out and embrace the outdoors whilst the weather's kind of warm here in the UK anyway. And I'm giving them things to take pictures of. So it might be, okay, today it's something wet, something with wings. It could be a selfie with something living or whatever. People are really embracing this, and I think it's because not only they're getting out and feeling great, but they're having to look for things, and that's getting them all excited. I wanted to hone this in whilst I had you here because strictly, not just from the physical health, but of course from the mental health as well. And we're also streaming here for my gym members too. And a lot of the times we get them to go out and get your steps in and stuff. Would you say that there is some power to that? Because when we were in the pandemic here on this side of the pond, I don't know what it was like on your side, but because everything was shut, including my own businesses, shut, so the only thing to do was to get outside. But what I've seen since the world kind of reopened again is the amount of people who are still doing that because of how it made them feel, And maybe they did some of the stuff we've talked about on this episode so far about the soul searching and and clarifying and getting what zone they're in. So, because we're talking about sort of getting outdoors in a group, so I just wanted your 2 cents on that and on what your advice is with the link to mental and physical health with being outside and getting some enrichment from the outdoor world.
Oh, it's so important. There's just so much research that indicates the power of nature to help us heal and to help us reset. They've done all kinds of research on healing and trying to inform, like, hospital settings and things like that in an effort to make hospitals a more healthy, but more a place where more healing can happen, right? So, and nature is the huge thing. Sweeping mountain vistas, animals, trees, they're surrounding the images that are inside of the hospital. They're trying to open up the windows so that people can see out, trying to bring some service animals in an effort to really capitalize on the power of nature to help with healing. And our bodies, even when we're exercising, right, we're sort of tearing ourselves down and we need to build ourselves back up. So the point is, even no matter what kind of healing you need, whether or not that's also a healing of your nervous system by switching from the stress mode back into the rest and digest or social mode. These are, because again, those modes, one is survival, one is social. So in survival mode, we tend to do fight, flight, or freeze. And in social, we tend to make connections and to collaborate more effectively with others. So again, it's very healing, getting us back to our more natural way of being, which is our social
I think people already know, but it's good to have other people coming in, people listen to me talking to them all the time about, get outside, go and get your steps in, this and that. But sometimes to have somebody else, another person's perspective, specifically with your credentials, they'll listen to you. So it was really good to basically clarify what I already tell them, but in a much more better way that you described it. Let's say, no, we're kind of wrapping up here, but I wanted to, something I like to do with any of my guests on my show here is, do you remember Jerry Springer, bless him, when the whole Jerry Springer show, he used to do his little final thought, right? Well, I always trying to get my guests to give their final thought towards the end. So if I've got my listeners on audio on Spotify, and I will have some people watching this on video, and of course I've got my clients here in the groups that we're streaming on as well. So of all the stuff that we've talked about this evening, if you've got a final sort of message to sum up in one sort of paragraph, what would that be if you were to just give them something now to start off with? What would it be?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is really just the power of that growth mindset. Change is possible. And if you're unhappy with where you are, you don't have to stay there. You can make a change. And somebody like a coach, like a personal trainer, can help you get there. So really don't despair. Get in action.
Is the feeling that the pain of change is often less than the pain of staying the same. Or another one, which is comfortability is the enemy of progress. They all kind of work towards the same thing, don't they, Leslie? Which is, staying where you are sometimes can be quite, and I think it's kind of tied into what you mentioned before about those zones you're in, that's the most powerful thing I've taken from this today, for me personally, doing my own soul searching, is those zones that you're on about, and also about the survival and social sort of as well, because I'm fascinated with the brain and the human mind, man. It is so incredible, and although I'm a fitness professional. Yes, it's all about exercise. Like I said to you before, the thing that gives me the biggest boost as a personal trainer is not helping people achieve, well, it kind of is, because it all goes to the same thing, but it's not helping people lose weight and stuff. It's when they come out at the end of a session and go, I've really needed that today. I've impacted someone's day like that mentally, and that gives me a boost, and I love that. Instead of being a parking warden whose job is to ruin people's day, I get a lot of benefit, a lot from that. Leslie, thank you so much. That was some really powerful stuff, and I hope the listeners have taken something from that. I haven't seen any questions come in, but if it's okay with you, I'm going to attach your social media handles here, Leslie. So let me know, where can people go and give you a follow and reach out to you if they're looking for some advice. I have a couple of business owners here that might be listening as well that will love your help to then progress themselves to their staff or to their customers. Where can people go and find you?
Well, they can find me. My business is Bosch integrativewellness.com. And you spell Bosch like the spark plugs or the artist, Bosch. Bosch integrativewellness.com. And there's lots of resources on my website. People can book a free 30-minute consultation. I'm happy to speak with them, see what's going on, see what perhaps I could offer, and really sort of help them get going on the next step. I would be delighted to speak to your listeners.
Leslie, I just wish we had more time, but I could have listened to you speak there for quite some time. But we will definitely I'll definitely try and have you on again in the future if that's okay with you, because I'd love to ask you more. And I will get people. I will send you an email or something. If people do have some questions,
I would be delighted to come back. It was lovely to.
Okay. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in. And if you're listening to this on replay, whether you're listening on podcast or watching on video, or you're watching one of the streams here in the groups, Leslie, again, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Very good stuff. I've enjoyed all of it, and I will be heading onto your website to definitely check out some more as well. Okay, thank you very much, and all the best, Leslie.